In the highest tiers of professional motorsport, victory is not measured in minutes or even seconds. It is measured in tenths of a second, a fraction of a heartbeat. To find that fraction, engineers will spend millions of dollars and thousands of hours in wind tunnels, shaving millimeters of carbon fiber off a chassis just to manipulate the invisible air around it. In racing, you learn very quickly that the most destructive forces aren't the ones you can see, like a concrete wall or a blown tire. The most destructive forces are the invisible ones: the air pressure, the friction, the drag. I spent my entire life obsessing over how to control those invisible forces. I just never stopped to calculate the immense invisible drag that my own marriage was putting on my life. My name is Julian. I'm 35 years old, and I am the lead aerodynamicist and chief race engineer for a small, fiercely independent racing team competing in the World Endurance Championship. 4 years ago, I married Clara. Clara wasn't an engineer. She was our team's director of sponsorship and public relations. She was magnetic, incredibly persuasive, and obsessed with the glamorous VIP lifestyle that surrounds international racing. She loved the champagne in Monaco, the grid walks in Dubai, and the flashing cameras. I, on the other hand, spent my weekends sleeping on a cot in a freezing wind tunnel in England, trying to solve complex fluid dynamic equations. Despite our small budget, I spent 3 agonizing years developing a closely guarded secret. I called it the apex valve. It was a revolutionary active aerodynamic system. Using microhydraulics, it could dynamically change the shape of the car's internal air channels mid-corner, generating massive downforce without sacrificing straight-line speed. It was the holy grail of racing physics. It was worth tens of millions of dollars in patents alone, and it was going to propel our underdog team to a world championship. I promised Clara that this invention would change our lives. We would sell the patent to a major automotive manufacturer, and she would have the empire she always wanted. But Clara didn't want to wait for the checkered flag with me. She looked at my grease-stained overalls, looked over the fence at the billionaires in the VIP paddock, and decided she wanted to switch teams.
The shift in our marriage accelerated the moment a man named Sterling bought the largest, most heavily funded rival racing team in our paddock. Sterling was exactly the kind of man who ruins motorsport. He was a 42-year-old venture capitalist billionaire who bought a racing team as a shiny new toy. He didn't know the difference between oversteer and understeer. He wore $500,000 Richard Mille watches, flew his private helicopter directly to the track, and treated his brilliant engineers like disposable fast food workers. Because Clara handled our team's networking, she inevitably crossed paths with Sterling at the hospitality tents. Suddenly, she was spending all her time courting potential sponsors in Sterling's multi-story glass-walled VIP motorhome. The red flags didn't just appear. They waved violently right in my face like a black flag on the racetrack. First, the profound, unapologetic disrespect. Clara started actively belittling my life's work. "Julian, you need to wake up," she scoffed one evening, tossing her $3,000 handbag onto our kitchen counter. "Sterling's team has a catering budget bigger than our entire engine development fund. He's a winner. He dominates. You're just a glorified mechanic bleeding yourself dry for an indie team that's never going to win Le Mans. You lack killer instinct." Second, the intense, unnatural secrecy regarding her devices. Clara changed the passcode on her laptop. She started taking crisis PR calls in her car, sitting in the driveway with the engine running for 30 minutes before coming inside. Third, and by far the most terrifying, was her sudden, highly specific interest in my secure engineering server. Clara, a woman who couldn't read a telemetry graph if her life depended on it, suddenly asked me if the CAD files for the apex valve were finished and if the data was portable. When a PR director asks if a highly classified, unpatented engineering file is portable, you don't answer the question. You run a security audit.
When you are developing proprietary aerospace-grade technology, you don't just leave it sitting in a shared Dropbox folder. My entire engineering network was routed through a custom firewall that logged every single byte of data moving across the local area network. One night, at 2 a.m., while Clara was supposedly sleeping at home, my phone vibrated with a critical priority alert from the factory server. Someone was actively attempting to execute a mass file transfer from my secure computational fluid dynamics server to an unauthorized external cloud storage locker. I immediately pulled up the network logs. The IP address executing the transfer belonged to Clara's work laptop. I didn't storm home and kick the door open. I simply isolated the connection, artificially slowed the transfer speed to a crawl to buy myself time, and mirrored her laptop screen directly to my massive monitors in the factory. She had her WhatsApp desktop application open, communicating in a private chat with Sterling. I didn't just find an affair. I found a premeditated, multi-million-dollar act of corporate espionage. Sterling wrote, "My chief aerodynamicist just looked at the early wireframes you sent. He's completely losing his mind. The apex valve is revolutionary. If we integrate this into our chassis for the World Championship race next month, we will lap the entire field. Do you have the master CAD files in the physics code yet?" Clara replied, her words dripping with a casual, horrifying cruelty that made the blood freeze in my veins. "I'm downloading the master repository from his server right now. The idiot actually thinks I care about his underdog dreams. Tomorrow, I'll hand the drive to your engineers. Once your team wins the championship, Julian's team will lose their primary sponsor and go bankrupt. I'll serve him with divorce papers the morning after the race. He has no money, no lawyers, and no patents yet. He's just a naive mechanic, Sterling. I can't wait to stand on the winner's podium with you." Julian responded, "You're a genius, baby. The mechanic is going to buy us our next championship." I sat alone in the dark factory, the hum of the servers filling the absolute silence, staring at the glowing monitor as my entire reality shattered. My wife of 4 years was sleeping with a corporate parasite. Together, they were actively plotting to steal 3 years of my blood, sweat, and genius, rebrand my life's work as their own, win the world championship, and leave me utterly destroyed. They thought I was just a naive mechanic. They didn't understand the level of absolute, unmitigated destruction a master aerodynamicist is capable of engineering.
If you want to destroy a rival racing team, you don't slash their tires. You leave the tires perfectly inflated, but you quietly remove the brakes. I didn't confront her. If I did, Sterling's army of corporate lawyers would bury me in injunctions, claim I stole the code from them, and tie me up in court for a decade until I went bankrupt. I needed them to steal the code. I needed Sterling to proudly bolt my technology onto his multi-million-dollar race car in front of the entire world. So I went to work on the back end. I canceled her file transfer, but I didn't lock her out. Instead, I created a perfectly cloned master repository folder and placed it right on my unprotected desktop. To Sterling's lead engineers, the physics code and the CAD files inside would look absolutely flawless. It would compile perfectly. When they ran it in their multi-million-dollar digital simulators, it would show incredible, record-breaking lap times. When they tested it in their wind tunnel, it would perform like magic. But deeply embedded in the absolute foundational math of the active aero software, buried so deep in the hydraulic pressure code that no QA tester on Earth would ever find it, I wrote a logic bomb, a digital kill screen. I programmed the code with a highly specific trigger. The active aero would function flawlessly under normal conditions, but I coded a thermal and velocity threshold. If the car operated at exactly 200 miles per hour while sustaining maximum lateral g-forces for more than 10 seconds, a condition that would only ever occur on the longest straightaway during the actual endurance race, the payload would execute. It wouldn't just stop working, it would invert its own physics. Instead of opening the internal valves to reduce drag and increase speed, the hydraulic actuators would snap violently in the opposite direction. They would forcefully close all the cooling channels and deploy the internal carbon fiber flaps against the wind. At 200 miles per hour, the car would essentially deploy a massive invisible aerodynamic parachute. It wouldn't crash, I wasn't a murderer, but it would create so much instantaneous drag that the engine would suffocate, overheat, and completely destroy itself in a matter of seconds. I left the rigged folder on my desktop. I allowed her transfer to complete. I listened to the front door close as my wife stole my life's work, thinking she had just pulled off the heist of the century.
When Clara came home that night, she tried to look loving. "I made us dinner, Julian," she smiled, handing me a plate. "You've been working so hard." "Thanks, Clara," I said, looking her dead in the eyes. "The hard work is finally done." The moment she went to sleep, I unleashed hell behind the scenes. I took my original, time-stamped, air-gapped hard drives containing the true source code, my 3 years of developer logs, and my early hardware prototypes, and I flew directly to the most ruthless intellectual property and sports litigator in Europe. We formally registered the true source code and the proprietary hardware schematics with the International Patent Office, establishing an indisputable, federally protected paper trail of my absolute ownership. But I didn't stop there. In international motorsport, the FIA, the governing body, takes intellectual property theft incredibly seriously. It's called Spygate. My lawyer drafted a highly confidential, sealed dossier containing the Slack messages of Clara and Sterling actively conspiring to steal the code. We submitted it directly to the FIA technical delegates and the chief stewards of the World Endurance Championship. We informed them that Sterling's team was running a stolen, illegal aerodynamic package. The FIA told us they would initiate a covert inspection. But my lawyer smiled and told them, "Don't inspect it in the garage, wait for the race. The car is going to fail on the back straight. When it does, impound the vehicle." They were building a massive, glittering glass castle on the track, and I was holding the only stone.
Saturday afternoon, the pinnacle event of the World Endurance Championship. Over 250,000 fans were packed in the grandstands, and millions more were watching the live global broadcast. I stood on the pit wall with my underdog team, wearing my headset, watching the timing monitors. High above us, in the billionaire's VIP suite, Sterling and Clara were drinking champagne. Sterling's car was dominating. Because of my stolen technology, his driver had easily pulled ahead of the entire pack by 15 seconds. The commentators on the TV broadcast were losing their minds, screaming about the revolutionary pace of Sterling's team. Clara leaned over the balcony, looking down at me in the pit lane, giving me a smug, victorious wave. She thought she had buried me. I looked at my telemetry screen. I knew the math. Sterling's car rounded the final corner and hit the massive 3-mile back straightaway. The driver pushed the throttle to the floor. 180 miles per hour, 190 miles per hour, 200 miles per hour. 10 seconds at maximum velocity and maximum aerodynamic load. At exactly 2:14 p.m., the logic bomb executed. I wasn't in Sterling's car, but the onboard camera broadcast the entire disaster live to the world. Instantly, the micro-hydraulics snapped. The internal aero flaps forcefully slammed shut against the 200-mile-per-hour wind. On the live TV feed, Sterling's car didn't just slow down. It looked like it had hit a wall of invisible jelly. The massive, instantaneous drag violently threw the driver forward against his harnesses. The car's speed plummeted from 200 miles per hour to 80 miles per hour in 3 seconds. Because the cooling channels were forcefully sealed shut by the inverted valves, the massive V8 engine was completely starved of air. Bang! A deafening explosion echoed across the track. The engine violently detonated. A massive, towering plume of thick, acrid white smoke and fire erupted from the back of Sterling's million-dollar car. The car sputtered, choked, and pathetically ground to a halt right in front of the packed grandstands, completely dead. The crowd gasped. The TV commentators were in absolute shock. In the VIP suite, Sterling's champagne glass shattered on the floor. He started screaming frantically into his team radio, his face purple with rage. Clara looked like she was going to throw up. I took a slow, deep sip from my water bottle, keyed my radio microphone, and told my driver, "Push now. The leader is out of the race."
You cannot hide stolen technology when your car explodes on international television. The fallout was an absolute, apocalyptic corporate massacre. The moment the car stopped, the FIA technical delegates swarmed the vehicle. They impounded it immediately. When they plugged their diagnostic laptops into the car's ECU, they found my exact patented code, complete with my digital watermarks, running the entire aerodynamic system. The governing body was ruthless. Within 24 hours, they issued a global press release. Sterling's racing team was permanently banned from the World Endurance Championship for severe intellectual property theft and espionage. He was fined $20 million by the sporting authority. But the real world hit him even harder. Because Sterling had lied to his corporate sponsors about owning the technology, his massive venture capital investors sued him for fraud. His billion-dollar empire completely collapsed. He was facing federal indictments for corporate espionage. Clara's life was vaporized. Sterling, realizing he was facing federal prison, immediately blamed her, telling investigators that she was a rogue PR director who had supplied him with stolen files without his knowledge. He threw her under the bus to save his own skin.
She called me from a hotel room, sobbing so hard she was hyperventilating.
Julian, please. The FBI contacted me. Sterling is suing me. You have to tell them you gave me permission to take the files. Please, I'll do anything.
I didn't give you permission, Clara, I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. I just left the door open. You're the one who walked in and stole the bomb. Good luck in the VIP tent. I hung up and blocked her number. During our divorce settlement, she had absolutely zero leverage. Because she was facing criminal charges for corporate espionage and grand larceny against me, the judge awarded me 100% of the marital assets and denied her any alimony. She walked away with millions in legal debt and a felony record.
It's been 3 years since that race. Because Sterling's team was disqualified and banned, my underdog team won the championship that year. A month later, a massive German automotive manufacturer bought the exclusive rights to the real functioning apex valve technology from me for $45 million. I took the money, bought out my Indy racing team, and I am now the sole team principal and CEO. We dominate the grid, and I never have to sleep on a cot in a freezing wind tunnel ever again. Last I heard, Clara avoided prison by taking a plea deal, but she is completely blacklisted from the motorsport and PR industries globally. She is currently working at a suburban go-kart shack, handing out helmets to teenagers, watching cars drive in circles. Sterling is still buried in federal litigation, completely bankrupt, and permanently banned from entering any racing paddock in the world. If there's a lesson to be learned here, it's this. Never try to hijack a machine if you don't know the engineer who coded the physics. If your partner thinks they can use you as a stepping stone, steal your genius, and leave you to rot in the garage while they take the champagne, don't panic. Don't fight them for the hard drive. Smile, hand them the flash drive. Let them bolt it onto their car, and let them confidently launch into the biggest race of their life. And right when they think they've won, just wait for the telemetry to hit the threshold and watch them burn up on the back straight. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what's the most satisfying mechanical failure you've ever witnessed? Stay sharp, trust the data, and always stress test your code.